Hello, Facebook fans. If you're here for Lunchtime Live, I'm starting right here at noon, waiting for our audience, our Facebook friends. Hi, Bob. I think you're the first one here. And Mark, our two trusted, regular Facebook friends, watchers. So great to see you there. And I am going to do a little housekeeping first. Good morning, good noontime, Mark. And it is high noon here at the end of the North McCoy Trail. And I am off trail, just slightly off trail. And I am trying a new audio setup today. So if you can hear me, I'm trying a new microphone setup. And the wind isn't too bad today, but the helicopters are bad. Hi, Ann. Nice to see you there. Great, crystal clear. Okay. So I'm using a new microphone setup. And hopefully this will take care of some of those audio issues, especially when we get into more remote areas of the estuary. So it's great to see you all there. We will go ahead and get started. I'm Maria. Welcome to Lunchtime Live here at the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve, or Tijuana Estuary for short. We have our Facebook friends in the audience, hopefully some new friends joining us today. And if you're watching later as a recording, welcome. And of course, as usual, I like to make this interactive. I know there is a delay, but feel free to comment or ask questions on topic, please. Any other questions, I will get to those later. I like to go back and address your questions and comments after the fact, but our time is a little short. And today we are going to round out what we've been calling the Salt Marsh Series of these Facebook Lives. And again, I'm still wearing my mask while delivering this program today. Even though I'm off trail, I shouldn't encounter any of members of the public. We have still, the visitor center still is closed. The parking lot and the restrooms are closed, but our trails remain open. And we just ask that if you are using our trails, that you also keep that social distance, that 6-foot social distance, and wear a mask. And as always, I am sanitizing my equipment and washing my hands with soap and water throughout the day as I come to work and deliver these programs to you, which I absolutely love to interact with you and see your names there in the screen. So today we're going, like I said, round out the Salt Marsh Series. We started it off with life in a dynamic environment. I'm standing out here on the edge of the Salt Marsh in a new location. It's actually where we did the swallows, where Robin and I did the swallows. But when we were out here, we noticed something a little special related to the salt marsh. And that's what I want to finish this series up with today. So we talked about the adaptations for living in a marsh, dealing with that salinity, the methods that these plants have for dealing with salt, accumulating or excreting. And we explored a few of the high marsh species that are relatively common here and in salt marshes. But today we're going to look at a species that's much more specialized in a way, occurs in very few locations, and we're lucky that it's very close and accessible at the moment while we're doing this series. So how many of you have heard of Salt Marsh Birdspeak? And did you know it was a plant, or did you think it was a bird? So I didn't mention Salt Marsh Birdspeak in the other episodes, so to speak. But I may have mentioned that there are sensitive and endangered species that rely on some of these plants. So there's a question, not that I'm aware of. Is it used in indigenous medicine? Not that I'm aware of. So Salt Marsh Birdspeak is a plant. Okay, it is a plant, even though it's got bird's beak in the name, and we're going to get down and take a look at it. But Salt Marsh Birdspeak is not a common plant. It is endangered, or it is endangered, and it's not just endangered in the state of California. It's listed federally endangered. So this is a species, an endangered species. We don't often think of plants as endangered species. But this is the one endangered plant found within the Tijuana estuary, in the research reserve. But it is found in a couple of other locations in San Diego. And it's, for those of you who like the scientific name, this is called Chloropyron, and this is new for me. I had to learn this because it has changed. Chloropyron meridimum. Chloropyron meridimum, or Salt Marsh Birdspeak. And this is a plant in the Ornaceae family. Or am I saying that right? Let me check. This was new to me as well. Orobanchaceae family. Orobanchaceae. And these are plants that are mostly parasitic. Parasitic. So the plant we're looking at today is not only endangered, but it is what we call hemiparasitic. Partially parasitic. So let's get down and take a look at this stand of Salt Marsh Birdspeak. And as you can imagine, it's in the salt marsh, so it's a very low-growing environment. So I'm going to get down with the with that macro lens, and we'll take a look. But first, let's see. I'll just, if you can see behind me, just a little bit of behind me, you can see there's the channel, one of the main channels where the tide comes in and out in this dynamic environment. This to the west of me is Seacoast Drive. You may hear some of the wind, hopefully not. The microphone is working. I can hear some surf, actually, out there. And to the south here, there's Mexico. You can see Tijuana. Fairly clear day. And we have a rising tide in our channel. And so just behind me here, in that lush salt marsh vegetation, we have a lot, mostly pickleweed is what you're seeing. But if you can see, and of course I'm going to get down, I'm just trying to do a little pano here, some white, some color, white color, that's our Salt Marsh Birdspeak. So let's flip this around, turn it around, get it off the tripod, and get down to our Salt Marsh Birdspeak. And I wonder how many of you have seen Salt Marsh Birdspeak before. So I'm seeing this fairly clearly. I hope it's not too pixelated. But maybe now you can see that band of white and purple. A band of white and purple. That is our Salt Marsh Birdspeak. Oh, great. I'm glad you can see it. It is a beautiful area. This is one of my favorite spots out here at the end of North McCoy. I'm so fortunate, I'm so lucky that I not only am employed here, but that I still get to come here and bring these programs to you during this very uncertain, very challenging time. So I'm grateful every day. And there we are, the Salt Marsh Birdspeak. You can see there's a nice band of it here. I've never seen it here before. And we'll get into the details of this particular species as we get up close. So I marked one here I marked one here, And we'll use the macro in just a minute. So the salt marsh birdspeak, the Chloropyron meridimum, again, in that in the family that is mostly parasitic plants, the Orobanchaceae, also known as the broom rapes, interesting name, and mistletoe is found in this family. So if you know a little bit about mistletoe, and how it requires other plants for its survival, salt marsh birdspeak is the same way. However, hemiparasitic, meaning partially parasitic. So salt marsh birdspeak, you can see an individual here, okay, but we can see there's quite a bit of it here, and it's endangered. So I'm giving it its respect, so to speak, here. And you can see it doesn't grow very tall. I'll stand this individual up. Let's see. Not very tall. 8 inches or so, maybe up to 12, 16 or so. Annual plant, an annual herb, found, like I said, here, but also in northern Baja and California, native, coastal marshes and dunes, so low elevations, high marsh, salt marsh plant, okay, see it there. It has the ability to photosynthesize. It is kind of that purplish color, a little gray-green in there. It does have the ability to photosynthesize. However, it requires other high marsh plant species for its survival. It has, it attaches, it's kind of like these root-like structures called Hastoria that attach to other salt marsh species for nutrients and water. And we can see here, this plant has a fairly long stem. The leaves, you see them there, kind of in an alternate pattern along the stem, narrow alternate pattern, and then we'll get to what we see on the top. But can any of you see any clues that tell you how this plant deals with life in a dynamic environment when it comes to dealing with all of that salinity, that excess salinity? Are there any clues that we can see? And I'll put on the macro lens now. This plant is exuding there we go. Thank you for your patience as I get that macro lens on there. Can you see? Yes. White nodules. It is an excretor. Very good, Anne. It's an excretor. Salt crystals are very obvious. As I held that stem up, I got salt crystals on my fingers. You can see it there. So this plant is an excretor. So it's able to deal with salt by getting rid of it through its leaves, through those pores in its leaves. Now the salt marsh birdspeak, this white nodules, these are the flowers. So we see the flowers there, and actually we also can see, going back to the stems and the leaves, we can see, I think you can see, not just salt crystals, but hairs, small hair-like structures along this plant. And as we move up into the flower, the white flowers there, kind of got a couple of little like tips on they've got these little kind of tips or maybe lipped tops there. So it's in flower. And now this is a plant that can begin to flower in May, but the flowers can last through August. And how does that happen? A lot of our salt marsh plants have already flowered. Their flowers aren't quite so showy. And that is because of these root-like structures that this plant uses to attach, to gain nutrients, to gain water from other plants in order to persist. Because this is an annual plant. And annual plants have shorter lifespans than perennial plants. And so its roots are not designed to withstand a long, dry summer. And to produce a flower takes a lot of energy, and you need nutrients. And so this hemiparasitic plant uses that adaptation to mooch off of other plants in order to persist. So seeds will form. This plant produces kind of like a capsule-sized fruit, or a capsule-shaped fruit that contains some dark brown seeds. We don't see that yet. And it's these seeds that start the next generation. And these adults, these parents here, will die. The nature of an annual. Okay? And so salt marsh birdspeak must produce produce seeds that then germinate to produce the next generation. So we may not find salt marsh birdspeak in the same location every year. Now, these seeds that are able to germinate on their own, they will also need to attach through their ostoria to another plant. So these seeds will need to germinate and produce this ostoria in order to survive. And so these seeds must germinate near a host plant. So these seeds may be carried away from a high tide. Here at the high, we're at the high tide, so at a highest tide, the seeds can be carried away, and hopefully not too far away from some host plant. Now, very good question. Do they have a specific host plant? No, they do not have a specific host plant, but what they need is a perennial host plant. So a perennial host plant in the high marsh. Okay, so one that it can get its mooch off its nutrients through the dry season here. All right, so great question. There have been, studies done with this plant where they used some annual grasses to see if that would work, and it did not work. So a perennial host plant in order to survive Does it harm or kill the host plant? No. No, there was no there was no record of that. So it doesn't benefit the host plant, but it just mooches. It mooches and it doesn't harm it. Okay. Now, these Salt Marsh Birdspeak, they have these flowers, and like I had mentioned, not a lot of the other salt marsh plants, like we discussed, have show flowers, you know? And this, yeah, so the flowers are meant to attract the pollinator. And the pollinator for this plant, is fairly specific. They are ground nesting bees. And ground nesting bees. So there are bees that make their burrows just above the high tide line in very particular soil type here in the salt marsh. And these salt marsh ground nesting bees, and there are a few varieties, and from what I understand, in order for success of the salt marsh birdspeak, first you have to have the correct habitat for these specific pollinators. So you need enough high marsh, particular soil type for these bees to make their burrow. And I wish I did look around to see if I could see any here. I think we saw some last week. And they then also of the species of ground nesting bees, there are particular species that are much better at getting through those flowers. And these are not easy flowers to penetrate. Fairly closed. The pollen inside. So these are bees that will need to be large enough and strong enough and have the instinct to open up those flowers. Very interesting. So ground nesting bees of a particular size and species that will be able to successfully pollinate the salt marsh birdspeak and therefore then create the seeds. The plant can create the seeds that will hopefully have successful germination. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, reasons for being endangered are, we don't have a lot of these salt marshes left, but the pollinator for this specific species is very specific as well. All right, so I'm going to take the macro off, and again, show you. So this plant is found, a couple of subspecies of the Chloropyron meridimum, and here, the Tijuana estuary, in San Diego County, this plant is found here at the Tijuana estuary, at Sweetwater Marsh, and then I believe at Dog Beach in Ocean Beach along the river there. So not very many locations where this plant is found. Highly specific pollinator. Beautiful plant. Oh, thank you, Hiram. Yeah, so it is, I did not know it is federally protected in Mexico as well. And again, this is found in northern Baja, native to northern Baja and California. And again, yes, this is a halophyte, so it is able to deal with salt in this beautiful, dynamic environment, the salt marsh. So there we go. I leave you with, I leave you with the Salt Marsh Birdspeak to finish up our Salt Marsh Series for Lunchtime Live. If you have any more comments or questions, please ask them in the comments for this, and I will answer them later. As always, it's been wonderful. Thank you for bearing with me through the technical aspects of everything. I enjoy bringing these programs to you. I will continue to do so as long as I can, working out all the audio issues. I will hopefully see you on maybe a different day next week. I will not be able to deliver this program next Tuesday at noon due to another work conflict. However, I may choose a different day, so look for that. If not, I will see you in 2 weeks for the regularly scheduled Lunchtime Live, Tuesdays at noon. So thank you all so much. You guys have a wonderful day. And thank you, Facebook friends. Have a great day.